Hey you guys, it's Irene Lyon here, and I wanted to make this video for you. You are in my Healing Trauma series because there was a question that came to me the other day, and I realized that maybe I didn't cover this enough in the videos. Of course, I could make a little video like this for all your questions, but this one is really important because it has to do with the idea, the reality that we're living with in our world of chronic illness. So this could be chronic illness in the terms of physiological illness like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, digestive problems, but also mental illness and more severe forms of depression, anxiety, etc. And even down the spectrum, things like bipolar and other disorders that we sort of label people with. ADD is another one. But if you recall, in the first video, I talked about fight, flight, and freeze, right? So you get, I'm going to draw here, you have a stress that comes into the system, and there's this response where we hope that we have this response, because we have to have a response, where the fight, flight, the adrenaline goes up, up, up. We hit this threshold, and then we, I'm going to use another color here, blue, we come back down. We shake it off, we regulate back down to baseline, right? So that's in a perfect world. We want this up and down. That gives us that flow. What often happens, as I described, is that we have a stress come in, we go up, and we get stuck up here. We get stuck. So in other words, we don't come out of this high intensity state in our nervous system, in our autonomic nervous system. Over here, the fight flight is governed by something called your sympathetic nervous system, right? I didn't mention these because I wanted to keep it simple, but now I want to give you a little bit more. So that's your sympathetic nervous system. You go up, and then what's supposed to happen is that something called the parasympathetic starts to kick in, and as it kicks in and it increases, so this is time, that makes this stress response come down, right? So we have this other part of our nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. Now this one's a little trickier because there's two branches to the parasympathetic, and I don't want to confuse you with those details because it is more complex, but it's governed by something called the vagus nerve, okay, the vagus nerve. What happens when we have multitudes of stresses, lots of traumas, or as I mentioned in that first video, when we have early developmental trauma and we are no longer, let me get another color here, when we don't come down to baseline at the bottom here, we may never actually know what it's like to be fully regulated in our nervous system. So we're always kind of living in this upward zone. Lots of fight, lots of flight energy, sympathetic nervous system energy, and then lots of this freeze energy. Okay, so you might be wondering, well, if this parasympathetic nervous system helps calm the body down, why is it bad? And there's two types of parasympathetic nervous system energy, and they're not, it's not like a light switch. It doesn't mean one shuts off and the other shuts on, one shuts off, the other shuts on. They kind of have this spectrum. And what occurs in that we are seeing in individuals that have chronic illness is that they are living, they go up, so that's that fight, flight, and their parasympathetic comes in, but it never comes down. And so what happens is they stay both up high. They stay both up high, and the sympathetic fight flight also stays high. Both stay high. They don't come down, right? They're not in good symbiosis. And then what occurs is at this intersection, and of course this is a really crude diagram, at this intersection here, that is where what we call the syndrome occurs. In other words, the chronic illness, the fatigue, the pain, the migraine headache, the colitis, all the things, the cystitis in the bladder, autoimmune problems. When we get stuck and the freeze, the parasympathetic is on too much high, and the fight flight is on high, we have this situation where we have the gas is on, so the sympathetic is on, and the brake is on so strong, and then they clash. And if you think about a car engine, you do that in a car, and sooner or later the engine's gonna die. It's gonna not work anymore, which is exactly what happens in the human system, in the physiology. So this is that spot where these things come into play. In order to help get the system out of that chronic state of fight, flight, and freeze, as I mentioned in video number 3 in the Healing Blueprint, we need to build those pillars: education, awareness, capacity, regulation. We need to teach a person how to come out of these high zones and come down, but we also don't want to do it in a way where we drop so fast that the system doesn't know what hit it. So we need to work very slowly, very strategically. We need to have, like I said, all those layers, the awareness, the capacity on board first before we can start doing the heavy lifting and working often with specific traumatic events, or the early developmental trauma, which we work with in terms of working at that stress organ level, the kidneys, the adrenals, the gut, the brain stem. Because this blue line here, the parasympathetic nervous system, that we want to be healthy, when it's on too much, in too much of a freeze, shutdown, it creates a very, very low oxygen, low metabolism environment in the human system. And as human beings, you and me, we're mammals, we need a lot of oxygen to be healthy, to repair, to allow our gut lining to repair when we sleep, to allow our cells to regenerate, to allow our immune enhancing properties to come on board at night. But when we're stuck up here in high parasympathetic tone, we can't recover, we can't repair. This is why these individuals have trouble healing, right? They feel sluggish and sore because there just isn't that good flow. So it isn't just this sort of etheric concept of flow, right? It's really in the physiology, and in that diagram, like I showed you, we want to get out of that crossover point. We need to come down. I remember when I learned this years ago with my teachers down in San Diego, I remember seeing that graph and kind of going, oh my God. And then I asked my instructor, Steve Hoskinson, I said, basically what you're trying to tell me is that all illness, everything, mental, physiological, unless it's like a true genetic defect, like Down syndrome, or people have trouble with blood clotting, that kind of thing, that's different. But chronic illness, heart disease, cancers, all these diseases where the immune system doesn't know what to do, it's because of that. And I sat there and I went, oh my God, this is crazy. And how come we don't know about this, right? How come all these specialties that we've developed in the medical world to treat specific areas haven't caught on to this? And it's just because this is new information, right? The parasympathetic nervous system and its various branches has just been really discovered just in the last 20 years. This hasn't even made it into the medical textbooks to the degree that they're researching it. So it's very new. But at least in the fields of somatic psychology, body, psychotherapy, etc., we are understanding this thing that I just showed you with fight, flight, and freeze being locked together and putting the system into chaos. That's the first thing. Second thing, I'll be quick. We know, due to a study called the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, I'll link up some things somewhere near here, but they have found, and it's so conclusive, you can't even deny it anymore, the research is solid, that early childhood experiences traumas inflicted when we were really young, stressful home environments, mothers, fathers that are depressed and not well or sick themselves, feeling unsafe in our environment, having a lot of unpredictable circumstances. Kids will often say, I was always walking on eggshells. I never knew when dad or mom was going to come home and they were going to be in a terrible mood. That kind of environment is toxic to a little person's system, and it puts them into this because they have to shut down to preserve their safety. But underneath that shutdown is this screaming system that wants so desperately to get out of there, but it can't because it's not safe to do so. So these children become in a bind. The research shows in America that 63% of white middle-class America has had some form of early adversity when they were young, and that's middle class and the white population, Caucasian population. So you can just think about that, because obviously other ethnic populations have higher rates of traumatic experience just due to, I'm not even gonna get into it, you get it. So this is just to say that yes, the nervous system, New Inner Game nervous system rewire program, it is designed to get a person out of that situation slowly and with safety and support. So I hope this answers that question. I hope that my little drawing made sense to you. Again, I'm keeping it really simple. In the program, we go way deeper into these different branches of the parasympathetic nervous system, how to work with the vagus nerve. A lot of research is trying to work with the vagus nerve by like implanting electrodes inside of a person to help stimulate that nerve. And I'm like, why? We've got this way of working with the mind-body, with the environment in a way that is totally non-invasive and works. I've seen it work. Be sure to listen to some of the video interviews that I have on the registration page, especially Lisa, and I've also will link up Heather's story. She came into this course last year. Her organs were failing her. That's what her doctor even told her. She went through this course and it's like they didn't miraculously. She put in the work. She did the work. They shifted. Is she 100% cured of everything? No, you know, that isn't what this is about. It's about getting to this place of good stabilization and resiliency. I got a burn the other day and my system is a little stressed right now because I've got lots going on, so I'm not healing as fast this week. You know, a month ago this would have healed a lot faster. So I'm aware of that. I'm not worried about it, but it just shows that our systems go through various changes with the season, with how we're in our work, our relationships, but at the end of the day, we want to come down to baseline. We want that flow to come back, and to do that, we need to get out of those fight, flight, and freeze responses. All right, I will leave it at that. If you have any questions, obviously Facebook group, drop me a line or send us an email at support@irenelyon.com. Take very good care. Bye for now.